Have you ever seen a woman fall into silence, yet her entire world was collapsing within that silence? This is the story of Desiree King, a woman who lived in a house by Lake Washington, where everything seemed perfect. A successful husband, 2 well-behaved children, and a life that looked complete. But behind those bright-lit walls was a heart slowly losing itself. And then, one day, she disappeared. No one knew that her disappearance would mark the beginning of a journey to find the light again, not anyone else's light, but her own. Seattle was still asleep. The rain fell softly, as if the city was holding on to a deep sadness. On the road overlooking Lake Washington, the few mansions still lit cast pale yellow reflections through their windows, like eyes that refused to rest. In the ash-gray house at the end of the hill, Desiree King was already awake before dawn, as always. The clock on her bedside table had long been turned face down. She no longer cared what time she began her day. She only knew that when the darkness still lingered among the trees outside, she was already standing in the kitchen, hands wet from cold water, preparing for another day. The house was frighteningly quiet. Upstairs was Brandon's room, her husband, the man the city admired. Whenever she read the news or watched TV, his face was confident, booming, with the proud look of a man who always won. And she, the woman standing behind those pictures, was a shadow. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Desiree knew precisely how he liked it. Arabica, light roast, medium strength, water at 203 degrees Fahrenheit, no more, no less. One wrong detail, and he would frown, say something sharp, as if her mistake had ruined his entire morning. She sliced fruit thin, even pieces. Everything had to be perfect. 18 years of marriage had taught her that the slightest mistake could turn into the deepest wound in this house. Footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. Brandon came down, white shirt, silver watch, a faint trace of expensive cologne following each step. He didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on his phone, his fingers scrolling through emails. Desiree smiled, an automatic reflex. "I made your coffee. It's cooled. How you like it?" He lifted the cup, took a sip, then set it down with a cold clink. "Still a bit too hot." Desiree said nothing. She poured another cup she'd prepared earlier. He didn't look at her, just sighed. "No, thank you." No glance. Breakfast passed in the sound of knives against plates. Brandon ate like a man fulfilling an obligation. Desiree sat quietly beside him, watching the man who had once been the love of her life. There was a time, she told herself, maybe he's just tired. But what kind of exhaustion lasts 2 decades? Turning a husband into a stranger. Light footsteps came down the stairs. Luna, her daughter, appeared, phone in hand, the glow of the screen reflecting on her young, detached face. "Mom, I don't need the lunchbox anymore. My friends said their moms don't make them eat homemade food. You can keep it." Her tone was sharp. Desiree smiled faintly. "I just thought you might like it, but eating out's fine." Luna shrugged and sat beside her father, her eyes full of admiration as she looked at him. "Dad, can I use your card today? I want new workout gear." Brandon nodded without asking how much. Luna beamed. Desiree watched the scene, her heart tightening. She used to be the one looked at that way with trust, with love. But in this house, love had changed direction. Now, only silence sat beside her. Harry, her son, came down last. Headphones in, jacket half on, a piece of bread in hand. He walked straight out the door. No greeting. Only Desiree remained in the dining room, surrounded by the smell of coffee and dirty dishes. She cleaned like a machine. Dish soap overflowed onto her hands, cold and stinging. She saw her reflection in the glass of the kitchen door, thin, tired, but still careful, as if performing a ritual. Outside, the rain grew heavier. She thought of the early days of their marriage mornings, when Brandon used to wrap his arms around her and say the Seattle rain made him love her more. Now, the sound of rain only deepened her loneliness. She stepped out the back door, gazing across the lake. The chill brushed her face. For a fleeting moment, she imagined walking away, leaving it all behind. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. "Please wash my white shirts before 2. Event tonight." She exhaled. Okay. That afternoon, she sat in the small office behind the kitchen, where her old computer hummed quietly. From there, she managed parts of Brandon's company, scheduling, emailing, and balancing budgets. No one at the office knew how much this unseen woman did to keep everything running. On the wall hung her framed diploma. Top of class, Howard University. She didn't look at it anymore. Every time she did, memories came flooding back. The day she graduated, professors lined up to offer her jobs at top firms, while Brandon stood below the stage, holding roses, whispering, "Don't go anywhere, Desiree. Stay with me. We'll build something bigger than any of those corporations." And she believed him with all her youth and fire, believed so profoundly that she sold her future for his dream. The door opened. Brandon leaned in. "There's a party tonight at the Waterfront Hotel. Get ready. Don't wear red ivories wearing that color." Desiree froze. "Ivory?" He didn't answer, just nodded and shut the door. She sat still, fingers resting on the keyboard, her chest hollow. In the corner, the old clock her mother left behind kept ticking. She thought of her mother's words, "Never let anyone define your worth." But she had far too long. By evening, the Seattle sky turned to dull gray. Desiree made herself a cup of coffee, the first she'd brewed herself in years. Soft jazz played on the radio. She watched the rain fall on the porch roof, drop after drop, like endless untold stories. Her hand trembled as she opened the drawer. Inside was a folder, copies of the company's share contracts, documents Brandon didn't know she'd kept. Every page bore his name, but the red stamp from an anonymous investor fund still showed the proof that everything had begun with her. Desiree touched her own handwriting from 18 years ago, closed her eyes, listened to the rain, and felt pain rise like the tide. That night, when Brandon came home, he didn't go to the kitchen. His footsteps echoed on the wood floor, followed by a woman's laughter. Ivory. Desiree looked through the doorway as they passed. Neither paused. He only called back, "Don't wait up. I have company." She stood in the dark, towel in hand, heart pounding. She wasn't jealous, just empty. Like a house once full of laughter, now hollow and cold. Late that night, Desiree sat on the balcony after all the lights went out. The rain had stopped, but mist still shimmered in the air. Below, Lake Washington reflected the city's glow, distant lights, belonging to people who still reached for each other. She heard Brandon's car pull away, then silence. One question echoed in her mind. If I disappeared, would anyone notice? No one. The next morning, Desiree woke early again. Habit, as if her life had no other setting. She set the table, made coffee, placed the pastries, and wiped the counter. Everything perfect. Brandon came down, adjusting his tie. Luna and Harry followed, their chatter blending with the rain. Minor complaints, careless words. No one asked if she'd slept well. No one saw the tiny cut on her hand from washing dishes for too long. When they left, she stood by the door, watching them go. The door shut. The house fell into complete silence. Desiree leaned against the wall and slid down to the floor. No tears. She didn't have any left. She took out an old photo from the drawer, their wedding day. Brandon, young and bright, holding her among lavender fields in Oregon. His eyes then were different, tender, full of wonder, and hers pure, sure that love could save anything. Now she knew. It's not love that saves people. It's kindness. And once that's gone, love means nothing. That afternoon, she went to the local market for flowers. The old florist asked, "Sweetheart, why do you always buy white ones?" Desiree smiled softly. "Because they're peaceful." The woman studied her for a moment, then said, "Those who buy white flowers every week are usually the ones trying to comfort themselves." Desiree said nothing, just held the bouquet tighter. That evening, she placed the flowers on the dining table. Dinner passed in silence again. Brandon talked about work. Luna showed pictures of her friends. Harry scoffed when his mother asked about school. No one listened to anyone. When the meal was over, Desiree cleared the table. Brandon's voice called from the other room. "Desi, I need my white shirt ironed." "I already did," she said quietly. He only nodded. No thanks. No glance. As he walked away, she looked after him, lips parting but no words came out. There are things you stop saying when you know no one will hear. That night, she couldn't sleep. She went back to the balcony and sat beneath the thin drizzle. In the distance, the Space Needle blinked like the lighthouse she once loved when she first came to Seattle. That light still shone over the city, but it couldn't reach her loneliness. Desiree scrolled through her old photos, stopped at one from their early days, both wearing cheap raincoats, laughing wildly under a storm. "One day, we'll have everything," he'd said. "As long as we have each other," she'd replied. Now they had everything except each other. She whispered to herself, her voice trembling in the dark. Tomorrow, I'll wake up early again. I'll make breakfast, like always. But someday, maybe I won't. Outside, the rain blended with the wind. The house stood still, grand, elegant, but there was no laughter, no warmth left inside. Only the ticking clock, counting down the seconds of a marriage long dead, one that no one had bothered to bury. Before Seattle became her cold, silent cage, there was a time when Desiree King believed that love could save a man. It began 20 years earlier, in Washington, D.C., on a golden autumn afternoon, when Desiree was still a senior studying finance at Howard University, the school known for its brilliant, proud black students. That day, she left class late, carrying a heavy stack of books, and stopped by a small cafe near the campus gate. The place smelled of strong espresso, with old soul music drifting under the warm, amber glow of hanging lights. She picked a quiet corner, opened her laptop, and started preparing her presentation on venture capital investments. The cafe door swung open. A young man stepped in, white shirt wrinkled, tie loosened, looking exhausted but with strangely bright eyes. He ordered a black coffee, then realized he'd forgotten his wallet. The barista frowned as he stood there, fumbling through empty pockets. Desiree saw it, and before she could think twice, she stood up, walked over, and said softly, "Put it on my tab." The man turned, surprised. "Thank you. I'll pay you back. I promise." She smiled. "It's okay. You look like you need more than just a cup of coffee." He chuckled, a low, rough laugh, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "I'm Brandon King." That name would one day belong to one of Seattle's most powerful men, but at that moment, he was just a struggling dreamer drowning in debt and ambition. They talked about work, about finance, about dreams. Brandon told her he was starting a small tech company, developing software platforms, but his investors had just pulled out. The company was collapsing. Desiree studied him for a moment. "Do you have a new plan?" He shook his head, eyes dimming. "No. I need someone to believe in me. Just one person." Something inside her stirred. In the weeks that followed, they met often. She helped him fix his financial plans, cut unnecessary costs, and balance the books. Brandon began to smile again. He told her his dream to build technology for ordinary people, not just the rich. "That sounds noble," Desiree said. He grinned. "And what's your dream?" She lifted her gaze, smiling gently. "To do something I can be proud of." They became friends. Then love arrived, quiet as breath. They sat together in the library through winter nights. She worked on reports while he coded lines into a flickering screen. When the lights went out, they walked home through snow-dusted streets, laughter mingling with their visible breath. Brandon would squeeze her hand and whisper, "As long as I have you, I'll never be afraid to fail." Back then, it sounded like a promise. Later, Desiree would understand that saving someone sometimes means drowning with them. The year they graduated, Desiree received offers from 3 top financial firms in New York, San Francisco, and Boston, the kind of salaries any student would dream of. Brandon, on the other hand, stood on the edge of ruin. His company was being sued, investors had gone, and employees were leaving. He came to her pale-faced, voice hoarse. "Desi, they're taking everything. The apartment, the company, everything." She took his hand. "You still have me." He looked at her, a flicker of hope in his tired eyes. "You won't leave me, right?" "Never." That night, she declined all 3 job offers, packed her bags, and moved to Seattle with him. Her friends called her insane. Her professors tried to stop her. Desiree only smiled. "They call it sacrifice. I call it love." Seattle greeted them with endless rain. Their tiny apartment on Pine Street barely fit 2 people. Desiree put her degree aside and took temporary accounting jobs at local shops. At night, she helped Brandon manage the company's books. His company, King Technologies, had only 3 employees left. The computers were old, the desks wobbly, but the fire in Brandon's eyes burned brighter than ever. "One night," he said, "I'll show the world I can make it, Desi. And when I do, I'll buy you a big house by the lake with windows that face the rain." "You love the rain, don't you?" She smiled. "Just promise you won't give up." He pulled her close, the rain tapping softly on the window. Then the hard days came. Contracts fell through. The bank accounts emptied. The last employee quit. Brandon stopped sleeping, drank too much, pounded the keyboard, yelling at bugs in the code. One morning, she found him sitting on the floor, head buried in his hands. "I failed, Desi. They say I'm a dreamer, that no one needs what I build." She knelt, took his hands. "No one starts successfully, Brandon. They'll see. But first, you have to believe in yourself." His eyes lifted, desperate, searching. "You believe in me?" "I do," she said softly. "And if you need saving, I'll save you." He laughed through tears. "I don't deserve you. No one deserves anyone," she whispered. "Just don't betray the faith they give you." She had no idea those words would one day come back to haunt her. Months later, the company ran out of money. Brandon faced bankruptcy, a debt of $350 million, an impossible number. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping. One night, Desiree woke to find him on the porch, head bowed among cigarette ashes. "I ruined everything," he murmured. "No one wants to save a loser." She stood there momentarily, then quietly said, "Someone still does." "Who?" She just looked at him and said nothing. The next day, Desiree went to the bank. She withdrew her late mother's entire investment portfolio, stocks saved over the years, worth $350 million. She sold her mother's small house in Houston, keeping only a few old photos. When she signed the transfer, the banker hesitated. "Are you sure, ma'am? All of it?" She smiled. "Yes, I'm sure." The funds were wired to Brandon's company through a small investment foundation she created under another name, DR Foundation. Brandon never knew that DR stood for Desiree. 2 weeks later, Brandon burst through the door, waving a letter. His eyes shone. "Desi, you won't believe it. An anonymous investor just poured money into the company. They believe in me, they saved us." Desiree stood there, heart racing but face calm. "That's wonderful, Brandon." He lifted her, spinning her around, laughing like a boy who'd just been given his life back. "I told you, God never gave up on me." Desiree held him tight, tears burning her eyes. "No, Brandon, it's not God. It's love that didn't give up." But he didn't hear her. Success came like a miracle. King Technologies rose from the ashes. Within 3 years, Brandon became a media darling, speaking at conferences, gracing the cover of Forbes with the quote, "I overcame failure through faith and vision." Desiree read the article in their small kitchen, staring at his words, unsure whether to cry or laugh. Not a single line mentioned her. She told herself, he just forgot for now. They bought the lake house Brandon had promised. It was beautiful, the house that made people stop and stare. But once inside, Desiree felt something in him had shifted. He spoke less, took more secret calls. At dinner, he scrolled through emails while she ate in silence. She kept working for his company, the unseen hand behind the numbers. Whenever the press came, she stayed out of sight. Brandon liked it that way. "They only need to know me, Desi." One night, she turned on the TV. Brandon was being interviewed live. The host asked, "What's the secret to your success?" He smiled and said confidently, "I've always believed in myself. I never waited for anyone to save me." The audience applauded. Desiree turned the TV off. Something inside her shattered, not because he forgot, but because he chose not to remember. Years passed. Their 2 children were born. Luna took after her father, cold, ambitious. Harry took after her, quiet, thoughtful, but as he grew, even he began to reflect Brandon's shadow. Desiree lived among luxury walls that echoed with emptiness. She learned to smile when forgotten. She learned to stay silent when interrupted. One evening at dinner, Brandon lifted his glass and said, "I'm expanding the company. There's a new employee, smart, promising." Desiree asked, "What's her name?" "Ivory Sullivan." She didn't know then that the name would one day burn everything she'd ever built. That night, Desiree walked alone by the lake. The rain was soft, glimmering under the streetlights. Years ago, she remembered that little cafe, the young man who once said, "I just need someone to believe in me." She had believed. She had saved. But when people are saved too easily, they forget who reached for them first. She looked up at the grey sky and whispered to herself, "One day, Brandon, you'll know who saved you. But by then, it might be too late." The rain mingled with the sound of the lake, and the night breathed in silence, as one chapter closed and another began. The first shadow of betrayal is named Ivory Sullivan. Seattle welcomed spring with gentle rain, soft as the earth's breath. In the yard, late-blooming cherry blossoms drifted onto the wet steps. Desiree King watched the rain glisten on the lake's surface from the kitchen window. She thought, If someone saw this from the outside, they'd think it was a perfect life. The lake house, the successful husband, the well-behaved children. Everything looked picture perfect. No one knew that the artist who painted that picture was slowly fading. That morning, Brandon left early. He said he had an important meeting with a new partner. Desiree didn't ask. As usual, she only reminded him to bring a jacket if the weather turned cold. He nodded absently, and as he walked away, the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume made her pause. Around noon, the phone rang. It was Gerald Hayes, the company's longtime manager, his voice polite but hesitant. "Mrs. King, Mr. Brandon asked me to forward you the schedule for the company's welcome dinner for the new executive. He said, you could come, if you'd like." Desiree blinked in surprise. Brandon had never invited her to a company event in 18 years. "Who's the new executive?" she asked. Gerald hesitated. "Miss Ivory Sullivan. She's been appointed as Mr. King's new executive assistant." That name made Desiree's heart sink a little, like a string quietly plucked out of tune. Ivory. She had heard it mentioned a few times before. A young woman, a graduate of a prestigious New York school, ambitious, sharp, and the one Brandon highly valued. She set the phone down. What she felt wasn't jealousy, it was something quieter, more fragile. A sense of foreboding, as soft and steady as the rain outside. That evening, Desiree went to dinner. The conference room glowed under golden lights and elegant chatter. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pinned neatly, her makeup subtle. She still looked graceful in the mirror, though her eyes betrayed a tired grace. Brandon was in the middle of a crowd, laughing. When he turned and saw her, he froze for a moment, then quickly put on his usual polite smile. "Desi, you came. You invited me," she replied gently. Then she saw her, the woman, walking toward Brandon with effortless poise, her smile radiant as if the room existed for her alone. Ivory Sullivan. She was young, 25, maybe. Golden honey hair, crimson lips, bright eyes that sparkled with confidence. The kind of beauty that didn't just attract, it demanded to be noticed. Brandon introduced them briefly. "Desi, this is Ivory, my new assistant. Ivory, this is my wife." Ivory extended her hand, her smile so perfect that Desiree couldn't immediately dislike her. "It's an honor, Mrs. King. I've heard so much about you, the woman behind the success of the man in charge." Desiree shook her hand. It was cold. "Thank you. I'm just someone who prefers to stay behind the light." Ivory tilted her head, still smiling. "Sometimes, the one standing in the dark is the only one who can turn the lights off." The words were harmless, but the look that came with them made Desiree's skin prickle. There was something in those eyes. Admiration, yes, but also challenge. That night, when they got home, Brandon was unusually cheerful. He kept talking about all the new ideas Ivory had suggested, how sharp, how bold she was, how she made him feel young again. Desiree stayed quiet. "You know," he said, laughing, "Ivory reminds me of the early days. She takes risks the way I used to." "Taking risks can be good," Desiree said softly, "as long as you're not gambling with someone else's heart." He didn't notice the edge in her voice. He just kept talking, and she saw the spark in his eyes that used to belong to her, now shining for someone else. A few weeks later, Desiree unexpectedly dropped by the office to deliver some documents. When she opened the door, she saw Ivory sitting in her chair, the chair reserved for the wife of the company's founder, laughing beside Brandon. Their eyes lingered on each other too long. Brandon stood when he noticed her, caught off guard. "Desi, you didn't call first. I just came to drop off the accounting reports. I thought..." "This was our company." The air tightened. Ivory smiled politely and stood. "I should let you two talk." Brandon nodded, but his eyes followed Ivory to the door. Desiree saw it, and the sight almost made her laugh through the pain. "Do you have anything you want to tell me?" she asked quietly. "Desi, don't misunderstand. She's just helping with work. Didn't you say the same thing to someone else once before I gave up everything for you?" Brandon sighed. "You're being paranoid. She's young. She looks up to me. And you?" Desiree's voice dropped. "Who is she to you?" He turned away. The silence said enough. In the following weeks, the house began to change. Brandon came home late. The strange perfume on his shirts became familiar. His phone was always face down. Every time Desiree entered the room, he stopped talking, his voice shifting to something cold. Luna noticed first. One evening, as Desiree set the table, her daughter said casually, "Dad said, You should dress more fashionably so people won't mistake you for the housekeeper." Desiree froze. "He really said that?" Luna shrugged. "I'm just repeating it." Harry looked up. "Don't say that, Luna." "Why not?" "It's true. Mom doesn't get Dad's world anymore." The kitchen fell silent. Desiree bit her lip. Head bowed. She wasn't angry, only hollow. Because when disrespect becomes the family's shared language, love doesn't die from betrayal. It dies from indifference. One rainy afternoon, Desiree was tidying Brandon's office. She found a hotel receipt in his drawer, 4 seasons, 2 nights, double occupancy. The restaurant bill was signed by B. King and guest, Ivory Sullivan. Her hands went white around the paper. Outside, the rain grew heavier. She placed the receipt neatly back where she found it like a secret, too tired to fight. That evening, Brandon came home, saying he had a business trip for a few days. She asked, "With Ivory?" He hesitated, then snapped, "Don't start, Desiree. You're exhausting me." She smiled faintly. "I only asked. She's my associate." "And what am I?" He didn't answer. "Don't turn this into a drama," he said. "That's not like you." Desiree let out a quiet laugh. "You're right. I'm not good at pretending." That night, she sat in the dark, listening to the rain tapping the window. On the table was their wedding photo, Brandon holding her in a lavender field, his eyes full of light. She looked at it for a long time, then whispered, "You used to be a man who needed saving. Now, you need an audience." Thunder rolled softly outside. Another chapter of love quietly closed. The next morning, Desiree went to the office early. She asked to see Gerald. "Gerald?" she said softly. "Have you ever thought Brandon's changing?" The older man looked at her, his eyes heavy with knowing. "I have, Mrs. King. But sometimes people only realize they've lost their way when they look back, and by then, it's too late." Desiree smiled sadly, thanked him, and left unaware that Gerald would one day be the one to reveal the biggest secret of her life. That evening, Brandon brought Ivory to the house. He said they had urgent work to discuss. Desiree opened the door. The light caught Ivory's face, bright, confident, not a hint of hesitation. "Good evening, Mrs. King," Ivory said sweetly. "Brandon told me you make incredible coffee." Desiree smiled. "Then I'll make some." From the kitchen, her hands trembled as she heard their laughter fill the living room, the sound echoing through a house that hadn't known warmth in years, now filled by someone else's joy. When she carried out the tray, Ivory smiled. "You're so thoughtful, Mrs. King. Brandon's very lucky." Desiree set down the cups and met her gaze. "Thank you, but he's only lucky if he remembers he's loved." Ivory said nothing, only smiled. A perfect, polished smile. It was too perfect to tell if it was real. Desiree sat alone in her room that night, listening to Brandon's car start outside. She didn't have to look to know who was with him. In the mirror, her reflection was pale and tired. She brushed her hair, whispered to herself, "She has a perfect smile, Brandon. But someday, you'll learn. The most perfect things are often the most false." Outside, the rain began again, and in the house by the lake, a wife finally understood. Her love had died long ago. Only tonight could she hear the sound of the earth covering it. June sunlight in Seattle has a strange kind of glow. Not bright, not warm, just enough to make people believe life is still peaceful. That morning, Desiree King stood in the kitchen with a crisp white blouse and hair neatly tied, arranging tulips into a tall glass vase on the dining table. It was Luna's 18th birthday, the daughter she once thought was her whole world. In the lake house, everything was ready. The custom cake, Harry's favorite salad, paper lanterns shaped like moons. Desiree had spent 2 days preparing them all by hand. When she stepped back to look, the house looked cozy, almost joyful, but she knew none of it was truly warm. She was patching together something already broken, and those sharp little pieces were about to turn back on her. By noon, Brandon came home, his charcoal suit immaculate, his phone pressed to his ear, and his tone clipped and hard. He didn't look at her. "Everything ready?" "Almost," Desiree said softly. "Don't overdo it. Luna doesn't like the old-fashioned stuff." "I know. But she still likes my cake." Brandon raised a brow. "The last time she ate one of your cakes, she was 12. Desiree froze mid-motion, tulip stems still in her hands, her chest tightening quietly. By afternoon, the house was buzzing with voices. Luna's friends arrived, laughter spilling through the halls. Desiree stood in the kitchen doorway, a smile plastered on like a mask. Luna appeared radiant among her friends, in a pale pink dress and shiny heels. But when her eyes met her mother's, her expression hardened. "Mom, can you please not wear the apron in the living room? It looks weird." Desiree blinked. "I was just bringing the cake. Let the staff do that. This isn't your party." The laughter faltered. A friend coughed awkwardly, changing the subject. Desiree pressed her lips together. "All right, I understand." She stepped back, still holding the plate, her gaze fixed on the daughter who once called her a hero. Brandon arrived late. When the front door opened, everyone turned. He walked in holding someone's hand. Ivory Sullivan. She wore a crimson dress, her honey waves glinting under the light, smiling as if it were her birthday. Desiree went still. No one spoke. Only the upbeat pop music played on a strange, loud rhythm inside a house once filled with soft jazz. Brandon raised his voice over the noise. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet the person who helped me through the toughest time this year, my colleague and dear friend, Ivory Sullivan." Applause followed. Desiree looked toward her children. Luna grinned, stepped forward, and hugged Ivory. "I've seen your photos. It's so great to meet you finally." Harry hesitated, then nodded politely. No one looked at Desiree. She steadied herself, walked to the table, and placed the cake down. "Luna, honey, it's time to blow out the candles." Luna smiled brightly, then turned to Brandon. "Dad, Ivory should stand next to me." Brandon nodded. Ivory placed a hand on Luna's shoulder, glowing under the camera flashes. Desiree stood at the edge of the frame, barely there. The candlelight flickered in her eyes. For the first time in years, fire was near her again, only this time it burned instead of warmed. Brandon lifted his glass as the evening wore on, commanding the room. "Tonight, besides celebrating my daughter's birthday, I have some good news. Ivory and I will launch a new project together and maybe a new chapter in my life." Laughter. Cheers. Ivory blushed, hiding her smile behind her hand. Desiree set her glass down. The soft clink of crystal was barely audible, but to her, it sounded like the shattering of her world. Luna looked at her father, eyes shining. "I wish you happiness, Dad." Harry stayed silent. The room applauded again. Desiree smiled faintly, untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table. No one noticed her slip out the back door. The rain had started again, light but cold. She walked through the garden, past the wilting tulips bowing under the wind. She didn't cry. Her shoulders felt lighter, as if she had finally set down a weight she'd carried half her life. The sound of laughter came from inside. Ivory said something that made everyone laugh. Desiree stood still, watching through the window, strangely calm. She whispered to the rain, "So this is what the end really feels like." When she stepped back inside, the party was still going strong. Music, chatter, flashing lights. She strolled through the living room. No one noticed her. Brandon was laughing beside Ivory, his hand resting casually on her back, so natural he didn't even bother to hide it. Desiree picked up her small handbag. Luna noticed. "Mom, where are you going? We're not done cleaning up." "It's fine," Desiree said gently. "Looks like everyone's already having a good time." Ivory turned, voice smooth as silk. "Mrs. King, are you sure? The party won't be the same without you." Desiree met her gaze, her smile slow and deliberate. Sometimes, knowing when to leave is the only way to keep things joyful. The room fell quiet for a moment. Brandon frowned. "Desi, don't make a scene." She nodded. "You're right. But you know what? I've been making a scene for 20 years trying to hold everything together. Tonight I'm finally just being enough." He opened his mouth, but she was already turning away. Before stepping out, she paused and said softly, without looking back, "Happy birthday, Luna. And congratulations, Brandon. I hope you find what you're looking for, because it isn't me anymore." The door closed. Rain mixed with music. Desiree walked along the lake road, heels sinking slightly into the damp ground. The lights shimmered on the water like fragments of memory. In her mind, scenes played like an old film: the cafe in DC, Brandon's first smile, their tiny apartment, their shared dream of building an empire. All of it flickered, fading. She remembered her mother's voice. "One day, you'll have to choose: live to be loved or respected. Rarely both." Now, she understood. She stopped at the bus station. No one noticed the woman standing in the rain, coat thin, small purse in hand. Around her neck hung her wedding necklace, the only thing she hadn't packed away. She looked down at it and whispered, "Goodbye, Desiree King, the wife, the mother, the woman who forgot who she was. It's time for the real woman to live." As she left the hill, the music from the house still echoed faintly. But no one inside realized that everything had changed forever from that moment. Brandon lost the woman who once saved him. Luna lost the mother who loved her unconditionally. And the house by the lake, from that night on, there was no longer a home. It became the tomb of a marriage. The next morning, the housekeeper found Desiree's room empty, her clothes neatly folded, everything in its place except for the wedding photo. On the desk lay a small note in delicate handwriting, "Don't look for me. When you understand the worth of faith, it may be too late for me to return. Desiree." From that day on, the lake house never smelled of fresh bread again. Brandon drank his coffee alone, saying, "It's a bit too hot." Luna slept late. Harry stayed quiet. Breakfast was filled only with the sound of knives against plates. No one realized that the silence had changed. It was no longer warm. It was cold permanently. Since the day Desiree King left the house by Lake Washington, no one in her family woke up early again. Breakfast vanished. The scent of baked bread faded, replaced by a new perfume, strong and artificial. 3 weeks later, Ivory Sullivan officially moved in. She didn't need an invitation. Brandon said it was temporary, but everyone knew nothing in his world was ever temporary, except love. Ivory entered the house as if it had been built for her. On her first day, she changed every curtain. "Grey makes me sad. I like white, clean, hotel white," she said. Then she called in a design team, turned Desiree's old bedroom into a makeup suite with floor-to-ceiling mirrors and golden lights. Every detail from the flowers to the morning playlist had to go through her. Brandon didn't object. He said, tiredly, "Whatever makes you comfortable." Luna sat on the couch, watching Ivory parade around. "Are you really planning to live here?" she asked, half joking. Ivory smiled, tilting her head. "Does that bother you?" "No. Seems fast." Ivory chuckled, resting a manicured hand on her shoulder. "When people find where they belong, nothing's ever too fast, sweetheart." Luna fell silent. Harry, quiet as always, just watched. His eyes carried something new unease. Ivory fired the entire old staff a week later, from the maids to the driver. "They're used to serving the ex-wife's way," she said. "I don't like the smell of that." The new staff followed her every word and addressed her as Mrs. Sullivan, a title she wore as easily as lipstick. Brandon still went to work, but the glow around him had dulled. Since Desiree's departure, things at the company had begun to unravel. A few contracts were cancelled, a lawsuit appeared over intellectual property, and whispers spread through the media. But he ignored it, convincing himself it would be fine. Every morning, Ivory sat in the same chair. Desiree once made coffee for her husband, legs crossed, phone in hand, lips painted crimson. "Want me to make you some?" she'd ask, voice sticky sweet. Brandon nodded. But after one sip, he grimaced. "To bitter." "Guess you like it the ex-wife way," Ivory replied, smirking. Brandon said nothing. At first, Luna enjoyed Ivory's presence. She was young, stylish, full of life, everything the girl found exciting. Ivory took her shopping, lent her credit cards, and even posted their selfies online with the caption, "Two queens under one roof." But one evening, when Luna showed off a new designer bag, Ivory tilted her head and said lightly, "You might want to tone it down a bit. Spoiled rich girls showing off always look cheap." Luna blinked. "Excuse me? I'm just giving advice. At your age, I was earning my own money already." The words hit like a slap. Luna stormed off. Brandon said nothing. Ivory sipped her wine, smiling. "She'll adjust." Harry, meanwhile, grew quieter. He spent hours in his room reading, staying out of everyone's way. Ivory hated the silence. One day, while tidying up, she found a framed photo on his desk, a family portrait, with Desiree still in it. She picked it up, grinning. "This picture's outdated, kiddo. She's not part of this house anymore." Harry snatched it back. "She's still my mother." Ivory shrugged. "Maybe to you, but not in this house." The glass cracked under his grip. He didn't reply, just walked out. Ivory watched him go, that faint, poisonous smile still on her lips. Piece by piece, the house began to crumble. Ivory wanted control over everything. Brandon grew colder. Luna pushed back. Harry retreated deeper into himself. The once living home now echoed only with tension and the dull quiet after shouting stops. And while they all pretended things were fine, retribution crept in softly, the kind that comes not with thunder, but with slow, silent loss. One morning, Brandon woke to find his Patek Philippe watch missing. "Ivory, have you seen my watch?" She glanced up, biting her red lip. "Maybe you left it at the office." "I don't touch antiques." He let it go. His credit card statement arrived the next day, over $80,000 in unexplained charges. "What's this?" he demanded, waving the bill. Ivory looked up lazily. "Oh, just a few essentials for the new project. Clothes, jewelry, image management, you know. You used company funds." She set down her glass, eyes narrowing. "Who are you yelling at, Brandon? Did you forget who's keeping your name in the headlines? Without me, reporters would have torn you apart over your little missing wife scandal." He froze. She wasn't wrong, but within 2 months, the headlines came anyway. A magazine ran the story. Desiree King, the woman behind King Technologies, disappears after her husband's affair goes public. Stocks dropped 8% in 2 days. A major investor pulled out. The whispers started, "Brandon King can't be trusted." Ivory slammed her phone down, furious. "See what happens when you can't let go of the past?" Brandon shouted. "That past is the mother of my children." Ivory's smile turned sharp. "No, Brandon, that past is your weakness." That night, she moved into another bedroom. Brandon sat alone in his office, staring out at the lake. The glass reflected a man who looked nothing like the one in the magazines, tired, defeated, empty. Luna began to see Ivory for who she was. One afternoon, she overheard Ivory scolding a maid. "I said clean the floor properly, not swipe it like the ex-wife used to." Luna stepped in, voice shaking. "Don't talk about my mother like that." Ivory turned slowly, her smile icy. "What's your tone, little girl? You're not the adult in this house." Ivory laughed softly, leaning close. "Oh? Then who is? Your father? He only listens to me now." Luna backed away, trembling. That night, when she opened her closet, the designer bags Ivory had gifted her were gone. On her desk lay a note. "Borrowed for now. Buy your own when you start earning. Ivory." Luna crumpled it, tears streaming down. "For the first time," she whispered. "Mom, I was wrong." Harry withdrew completely. One night, when Brandon's temper broke over the company's decline, he lashed out at his son. "You have no drive, no direction. You're nothing but a disappointment." Harry looked up, calm but cold. "I just don't want to become you." The slap cracked through the air. From the staircase, Ivory watched, smirking not with joy, but with triumph. 3 months later, the King house was just an empty shell. Ivory was rarely home now. Brandon was drained. The company teetered on the edge of collapse. Luna left for college. Harry stopped speaking to his father entirely. Brandon sat alone in the cold kitchen every night, under the dim golden light. On the table lay an old newspaper, his photo beside Ivory's, the headline bold, "The King Empire, Glory and Scandal." He flipped the page. At the bottom corner of the subsequent spread, a smaller line caught his eye. Desiree King, appointed advisor to the San Francisco Corporate Renewal Fund. He stared at that name for a long, long time. The glass in his hand trembled. For the first time in 20 years, Brandon King felt something he hadn't known in forever. Not loss, not regret, but fear. Fear of realizing too late that the only person who had never abandoned him was the one he'd driven away. Seattle had fallen back into its season of rain. The sky hung heavy and gray. Wind rippled the lake outside. Thunder rolled once inside the mansion on Queen Anne Hill, then faded. Brandon King sat alone in his office, the glow of his laptop reflecting off a hollow, sleepless face. On the desk lay piles of papers, lawsuits, bank letters, and unpaid invoices. King Technologies was on the brink of collapse. 3 months earlier, the last investor had pulled out. They'd said, "King Technologies is no longer transparent." The media followed with stories of debt, scandal, and his affair with Ivory Sullivan. And Ivory? She was gone. One morning, Brandon woke to find her side of the closet empty. The safe stood open. Over $20 million had vanished from the company accounts. All she left behind was a single note. "You thought you were the chooser, but really, you were always the one being chosen. Ivory, Brandon sat there for hours, no smoke, no whiskey, just staring into the rain. The only sound in the house was the slow tick of a clock. For the first time in years, the mansion felt too large, too silent. Harry barely spoke to him anymore. The boy stayed upstairs, the door locked. Luna had returned from college, older, colder. The sparkle in her eyes, once pride for her father, had become something closer to pity. "Do you know what people are saying, Dad?" she asked one night. "They're saying you were just the face of it all, and Mom was the real soul of King Technologies." Brandon stiffened. "Who told you that?" "The news. And Gerald Hayes. He said you forgot who saved you." Brandon's voice rose. "Gerald doesn't know anything." Luna didn't flinch. "He knows everything. He said Mom sold Grandma's assets to save the company. $350 million. Dad, remember that number?" The room went dead silent. Only the rain against the window filled the space. Brandon's knees went weak. 350 million. He remembered the figure. He had never questioned where it came from. When the company died, an anonymous investor had stepped in, saving everything. He told the press it was luck, divine intervention. He never thought that God might have worn the face of the woman he'd left behind. He sprang from his chair and tore through his old filing cabinet. Dust and folders were scattered. Then an envelope, yellowed with age. DR Foundation. His hands trembled as he opened it. The first page was a wire transfer signed by Desiree King. The red ink is still vivid. A single note underneath. "Investment for the restructuring of King Technologies, no repayment required." Brandon sank back into his chair, breath shallow. Cold rippled through his spine. He stared at the paper, and in it saw the face he'd tried to erase from memory. Desiree, the woman who'd believed in him when no one else would, who'd stayed awake beside him through endless nights, who'd once said, "If you need saving, I'll save you." He'd thought it was just love talk, but she had meant it. Literally. Rain poured harder outside. Brandon buried his face in his hands. He cried for the first time in his life, not for failure, but for guilt. "Desi, why didn't you tell me? Why?" But he knew the answer. Because she never wanted credit. She only wanted to be cherished, something he'd never given her. That night, Brandon went to find Gerald Hayes. The old manager's office sat by Pike Place Market, where rain met the sound of distant waves. Gerald looked up as he entered and sighed. "I knew you'd come someday." Brandon gripped his hand. "Gerald, is it true? Did she really do it?" Gerald said nothing. He opened a drawer and pulled out a worn file. "She came to me 18 years ago," he said quietly. "She told me not to tell you. She said, if he knows, he'll feel indebted and love dies when it feels like a debt. I want him to believe in himself." Brandon couldn't speak. Tears welled in Gerald's eyes, too. "She believed in you, Brandon. Even at the very end." They sat in silence. Outside, Seattle's rain fell endlessly, as if it were narrating the words people had left unsaid. "Finally," Gerald murmured, "in 30 years of finance, I've never met anyone like her. She was insane, maybe, but the insane this world needs. She gave up everything to make someone else shine. But men like you," he sighed, "you only get saved once." Brandon closed his eyes. Images of Desiree flooded back her curls, calm smile, and steady warmth. She had been his light, and he'd extinguished it with his own hands. He returned home near midnight. The house was dark and echoing. He walked through the hall lined with framed photographs, all of him with Ivory, with the children, none with Desiree. One by one, he took them down. Each frame hitting the floor sounded like another piece of him breaking. He sat among the fallen glass, whispering, "If you were here, Desi, what could I ever do to be forgiven?" Only the wind answered, whistling through the cracks, carrying the sound of rain. The next morning, Luna woke early to a strange noise. Downstairs, she found her father awkwardly holding a coffee pot in the kitchen. "Dad, what are you doing?" Brandon looked up with a faint, broken smile. "Making coffee, the way your mum used to." Water spilled over the counter as his hands trembled. "I don't know the exact temperature," he said softly. "She always measured it so carefully. Said if it got too hot, the bitterness would overpower everything." Luna stood frozen, her throat tight. For the first time, she saw her father not as the great Brandon King, but as a man utterly lost. That afternoon, Gerald visited again. He brought a small USB drive. "She asked me to give you this only if you ever truly regretted what you did." Brandon plugged it into the laptop. The screen flickered to life. Desiree appeared sitting in a softly lit room, her hair tied back, her voice gentle, steady, like rain. If you're watching this, it means everything has fallen apart. But Brandon, I don't blame you. I want you to understand, no one can save anyone forever. Sometimes, love means leaving. So the other person learns how to stand alone. And me? I've stood alone long enough. I'm learning how to live without needing to be saved. The video ended. Brandon stared at the frozen screen, tears spilling uncontrollably. He collapsed onto the desk, his sobs mingling with the rain. That same day, headlines broke. Desiree King appointed as senior financial advisor at Sterling Ashford Capital Group to publish book on rebuilding women's lives after loss. Below the headline was her photo cream suit, calm smile, clear eyes, no longer the woman behind anyone. Brandon held the paper for a long time. Luna came and stood beside him. "She looks beautiful," she whispered. Brandon nodded, tears welling again, and stronger than any of us. That night, as the lights dimmed in the King house, Luna went upstairs. Brandon sat alone by the window, staring out at the lake. The air was cold. The water is darker than ink. He asked for silence. How long does it take a man to realize he's destroyed the only pure thing he ever had just to feed his pride? No answer came, only the whisper of rain. And somewhere in that darkness, he thought he heard her voice soft, sure. "No one kills love, Brandon. It just moves to where it's safe." He closed his eyes, and for the first time, let the tears fall freely, until the rain and his sorrow became one. Autumn light in San Francisco has its strange beauty, warm gold, yet remarkable. The wind off the Golden Gate carried salt and mist through the steep, winding streets. Desiree King sat by the window in a small apartment overlooking the bay, a cup of green tea in her hands. Sunlight rested gently on her curls. It had been 8 months since she left Seattle. 8 months of mornings without Mom, without anyone asking for coffee or needing her to rise early. And in that silence, she finally heard her voice again. At first, she didn't know what to do with her new life. She walked miles each day, along Pier 39, watching sea lions sun themselves. Across the bridge railings, where the wind tangled her hair and dried the last of her tears, she used to think silence meant weakness. Now she understood it takes enormous strength not to cry out. One morning, in a cafe in the Mission District, a voice spoke behind her. "If I'm not mistaken, that's Desiree Robinson?" She turned. Sterling Ashford. He looked almost unchanged, tall, composed, grey eyes, calm. But unlike Brandon, his gaze never made her feel small. There was respect in it, not pity. "You recognized me that easily?" she asked. "Hard to forget," he said with a soft smile. "You were the only one who ever made me believe kindness could change a room." Desiree chuckled. "You still talk like you used to, and you still drink tea instead of coffee." They both laughed. For the first time in years, her laughter didn't hurt. They talked for hours. Sterling told her that after college, he had left DC for London and then returned to find Ashford Capital, a firm helping small companies rebuild from collapse. "I followed King Technologies for a while," he admitted. "I knew you were there, but you once told me you believed in your choices, so I stayed away." Desiree looked down. "I thought love was enough to keep someone." "No," Sterling said gently. "Love's only enough to keep yourself. The other person has to want to stay." She smiled, slow and real. "I understand that now." After that day, they saw each other often, not out of romance, but out of peace. He never asked about Brandon or Ivory. He just listened when she wanted to talk, and stayed quiet when she needed silence. One evening, they sat on a bench watching the sunset over the bay. "Do you regret not holding on to me?" she asked. Sterling smiled. "Sometimes. But if I had, maybe you'd never have known how strong you are. And I've always believed when a woman truly awakens, she finds her own light." She looked at him. "Do you think I've awakened yet?" "You stood back up," he said. "That's all awakening really is." That night, back home, Desiree stared into the mirror. A stranger looked back, no longer a wife, a mother, or a shadow. Just Desiree King, a woman who could finally face herself. She opened her laptop and typed the first line of a new book. "I used to think happiness was being chosen. Now I know it's choosing myself." Time moved quickly after that. Desiree King returned to the headlines a year later, not as Brandon King's ex-wife, but as a financial strategist credited with saving multiple struggling companies. She was invited to speak at a conference titled Women Rise, When Women Stand Again After the Fall. When she stepped onto the stage, the audience fell silent. The lights glowed softly on her calm face as her voice filled the hall. I once lived in a house where everything was perfect except love. I once thought sacrifice was the language of love. But now I know. When a woman stops sacrificing for others and begins living for herself, she becomes most beautiful. The crowd rose in applause. From the front row, Sterling watched her with pride and quiet admiration. After the talk, he approached with a card. "I want you to partner with my firm," he said. "Your name deserves to be on the door." Desiree smiled. "Thank you. But I don't work for names anymore. I work for women like me." He nodded. "That's exactly why I need you." Her new role took her across the West Coast, from small shops in Sacramento to non-profits in Portland. Wherever she went, she didn't just talk about money, she spoke about dignity, about how to rise after being broken. The press began calling her the reborn woman of Seattle. One article said, "Desiree King didn't seek revenge. She walked so far ahead that everyone behind her had to look at themselves." After returning from a conference in Denver, her phone buzzed one night. A message from an unknown number. "I hope you're well. If possible, I'd like to see you to apologize. One last time. Brandon." She stared at the screen for a long while. No anger, no ache, just peace like a lake after the rain. Her reply was simple. "No need, Brandon. Forgiveness isn't about returning, it's about letting go." She set the phone down and looked out the window. The Golden Gate lights shimmered on the water like strokes of gold. On the desk lay the manuscript for her upcoming book, The Awakened Woman. That evening, Sterling arrived with a bottle of wine. He poured 2 glasses. "So you really forgave him?" Desiree nodded. "Forgiveness isn't because they deserve it. It's because I deserve peace." Sterling was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table. "You know," she said softly, "I once thought my life ended when I left that house. But it turns out, only by leaving did I begin to live." He smiled. "And this time, do you want someone to walk with you?" She met his gaze, eyes glimmering in the wine's reflection. "Yes," she said. "Not because I need to, but because I want to." Their glasses touched with a gentle chime, the sound of a new beginning. Later that night, Desiree sat again by the window as the city fell quiet. The sea breeze carried a trace of salt through the open glass. She wrote the final line of her book. "If you're hearing this story, remember no one is coming to save you. Every storm you faced only came to remind you, you were born to fly." Winter in San Francisco brought no snow, just a clean, biting wind that carried memories of colder days. In Desiree King's small apartment, morning light filtered through white curtains, spilling across walls lined with book drafts, charity plans, and photos of women she had helped rebuild their lives. On her desk lay a silver invitation. Top 100 Influential Women of 2025. 4 Seasons, Seattle. The word Seattle made her pause. That city where she had lost herself and where she had been reborn. She smiled faintly. Life always knows how to close its own circles. 3 days later, Desiree's plane descended over Lake Washington. The misted hills were still the same, the water still serene. But she felt no fear, no ache, only calm. At the 4 Seasons, golden chandeliers glittered above red carpets. Desiree entered in a simple cream gown, hair pinned high, her smile composed. Reporters called her name as cameras flashed. "Desiree King, how do you feel about being honored tonight?" She answered gently, "I don't think I'm being honored for my past, but for the courage to walk beyond it." Applause rippled through the hall. Later that night, her phone rang. Unknown number. A man's hoarse voice, trembling slightly. "Desi, it's me. Brandon." She was silent for a moment. That voice had once been everything, now it was just an echo. "What do you need, Brandon?" she asked, calm. "I heard you were here. I need to see you, to say something, just once." Desiree stared out at the rain tracing soft paths down the window glass. "I don't know that there's anything left to say." "I know, but I'll never be at peace if I don't see you." A long pause, then she exhaled. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Café Nola, Queen Anne Hill." Seattle's rain was gentle that morning. Café Nola looked the same, small, warm, the scent of espresso mixed with pastry. Desiree took the corner table. When she looked up, Brandon stood at the door. He looked older now, hair flecked with grey, eyes hollowed by regret. The confidence was gone. He walked to her table, wordless at first, then softly, "You haven't changed, only I have." Change is good, Desiree said. It means you're still learning. He gave a sad smile. If losing everything counts as learning, then I've graduated. She studied him. No anger, no pity. You didn't lose everything, Brandon. You only lost what you never knew how to keep. He lowered his gaze. Desi, I know now. About the 350 million. About DR Foundation. I was too blind to see you were the one who saved me. Desiree smiled faintly. That's all right. I didn't do it for you to see. Tears gathered in his eyes. I'm sorry. It was a sentence she'd once waited a decade to hear. Yet now, it landed softly, like rain on stone. I forgave you long ago, she said. Not for you, for me. He stared at her, voice low. Are you happy? Yes, she said. Because I'm not afraid of losing anyone anymore. Brandon nodded slowly. Luna and Harry want to see you. They're sorry, Desi. Would you bring them? She said, gently interrupting. All of you here. By noon, the cafe door opened again. Luna stepped in first, her once defiant face now shadowed with guilt. Harry followed, quieter, softer. Desiree rose. They froze, as if afraid to disturb a memory. Luna spoke first, voice trembling. Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I believed all the wrong things. Desiree nodded gently. I know. You were young. What matters is you see it now. Harry moved closer, eyes wet. Mom, I missed you. The simple words broke her. She opened her arms, and they fell into them. None of them spoke for a long while. The only sound was the rain against the window. Brandon watched from across the table, his eyes glistening. When they finally sat down, the cafe was nearly empty. The golden light brushed the wooden table, the scent of coffee soft in the air. Desiree asked quietly, Luna, what are you doing now? I took a semester off. I'm volunteering at a women's foundation. I want to help people like you. Desiree smiled. I'm proud of you. Then she turned to Harry. And you? I'm studying music, he said. I wrote a song called The House Without Laughter. Desiree laughed through tears. That's beautiful. Maybe now, that house will find its laughter again. Brandon's voice cracked. Desi, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to see you like this. You're radiant. Desiree looked at him, her tone calm. You know, I once thought forgiveness meant going back, but it doesn't. It means looking at the person who broke you and feeling nothing shake inside. He nodded slowly. You're stronger than I ever knew. No, she said softly, just different. I used to love to be seen. Now, I live without needing to be. The cafe fell quiet again. Luna's voice broke the silence. Mom, do you think you'll ever come home? Desiree shook her head. Some houses aren't meant to return to. They exist to remind us we left at the right time. Harry nodded faintly. I understand. When they left, the rain was steady and soft. Desiree watched them go, father and children side by side under one umbrella. Brandon turned once, as if to say something. She only shook her head and smiled. Go, Brandon. Our story's done. He nodded. Luna and Harry waved through the rain, tears mixing with the drops. Desiree stood until they disappeared into the mist. That evening, back in her hotel room, she opened her laptop. An email from Sterling awaited. Saw the news. You were magnificent. I've got tickets to Harry's concert tomorrow. Come with me? She smiled and typed one word back. Yes. Seattle was still draped in rain outside, just as it had always been. But this time, the rain wasn't cold, because in her heart, Desiree carried the warmth of forgiveness and the quiet power of a woman who had finally returned to herself. That night, Seattle shimmered like it had borrowed the stars. The Four Seasons on Lake Washington glowed in gold, its light rippling across the still water like liquid fire. Inside the grand ballroom, a jazz band played Moon River, its melody threading through laughter, the chime of glasses, and the soft rhythm of polished shoes on wood. Desiree King entered through a storm of camera flashes. Her gown, champagne silk, simple yet flawless, hugged her silhouette. Pearl earrings glinted beneath the chandeliers. She wore no diamonds or crown, only the quiet light from someone who has survived the dark. Guests whispered as she passed. Is that really Desiree King? It can't be. She looks nothing like the woman who used to be Brandon King's wife. No, she looks like herself. Desiree smiled faintly, moving through the crowd with calm grace. From the front row, Sterling Ashford rose to meet her, hand extended. You made it, he said warmly. I promised I wouldn't be late anymore. Together they crossed the room, flashes trailing behind them. People turned to watch an elegant pair, glowing quietly, like a fire held steady in winter. The gala honored those who transform society through the power of rebirth. The room erupted when they announced her name, Desiree King, Woman of the Year. Under the spotlight, she ascended the stage slowly, every step measured, certain. At the podium, she paused. For a moment, memories flickered through her mind. A rainy kitchen, a birthday cake, a marriage crumbling in silence. Then she breathed and began. I once thought success meant being recognized, but real success is walking away and still feeling at peace. I once lived in a house everyone called paradise, until I learned paradise can also be the prettiest kind of prison. To anyone listening tonight, don't fear losing someone. You never truly lose when you still have yourself. Silence blanketed the room. Then, applause thundered. Some stood. A few women wiped tears. Sterling watched her, pride and tenderness in his eyes. Desiree smiled softly, bowed, and stepped down. At the back of the hall, 3 quiet figures sat unnoticed: Brandon King, Luna, and Harry. Brandon's hair was silver now, his shoulders heavier. Luna held his hand. Harry sat still, gaze fixed on the stage. As Desiree stood in the spotlight, they said nothing. Finally, Luna whispered, "I've never seen her this beautiful." Harry's voice trembled. "She doesn't need the light. She is the light." Brandon didn't speak. He just looked up, eyes glassy. In the chandelier's reflection, tiny stars seemed to break inside them. Later, as the orchestra began a soft waltz, Sterling extended his hand. "Dance with me?" Desiree laughed. "You think I still remember how? I think you never forgot." She placed her hand in his. Music flowed around them as they moved through the room, golden light spinning like falling constellations. Sterling leaned close. "I've waited long to see you smile like this," she whispered. "Thank you, for not trying to save me, just letting me find myself again." He squeezed her hand, eyes warm, steady. When the song ended, Desiree slipped away to the balcony. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of rain. Across the terrace, Brandon stood alone, a glass of untouched wine in his hand. For a moment, they only looked at each other. No pain, no resentment, just quiet understanding. "I didn't think you'd come," she said softly. "I wasn't going to," he admitted. "But Luna wanted to. And I wanted to see you one last time in the light you always deserved." She turned toward the lake. "You rebuilding?" He gave a weary smile. "Trying to. The company's gone. Ivory's long gone. But I still have the kids. Maybe that's enough to start again." She nodded. "That is enough. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to see who you are finally." Brandon's eyes softened. "When you left, I thought I'd hate you. But now I realize you didn't leave me. You saved me from myself." Desiree smiled faintly. "We all do what we must. Everyone deserves their own path." His voice broke. "Do you think, if there's another life, we could start over?" She met his gaze, calm and clear. "We already have. Just in different directions." Brandon chuckled, tears spilling down his face. He set his glass on the railing. "Thank you for loving me once. And thank you," she said gently, "for teaching me to love myself." A soft breeze swept through, carrying the scent of rain. Sterling appeared behind her, draping his coat over her shoulders. "You're freezing," she smiled, taking his hand. "Let's go back. The night's too long." Before turning inside, she glanced once more at the lake. Brandon still stood there, his reflection wavering on the water. For the first time, she felt no ache, only release. It was as if she'd finally set down the weight she'd carried for 20 years. Inside, the band began "The Way You Look Tonight." Sterling led her back to the floor. This time, she didn't hesitate. They moved slowly, gently, her head resting on his shoulder. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered, "because I'm no longer afraid of the light." He smiled. "That's all that matters." From across the room, Luna and Harry watched. Luna gripped her brother's hand. "She deserves this, doesn't she?" Harry nodded, eyes bright, every bit of it. When the night ended, the lights dimmed to amber. Desiree stepped out once more onto the balcony. Seattle slept beneath a veil of mist, the lake glimmering faintly below. She looked up at the sky, at the faint, scattered stars drifting beyond the clouds, and softly, to no one in particular, she whispered, "Sometimes you have to walk through hell to realize heaven was always inside your own heart. The wind carried her words out over the water, turning them into the gentlest sound, the kind of sound you hear just before morning comes. Dawn came slowly to Seattle. The first threads of sunlight slipped through a thin veil of fog, glinting off the calm surface of Lake Washington. The world seemed to hold its breath in the quiet hotel room on the 16th floor. Desiree King sat by the window, wrapped in a soft cardigan, a cup of tea warming her hands. She hadn't slept much, yet she wasn't tired. Some dreams, she thought, only come when you're awake, and this morning she felt she was living one. Sterling stepped in from the balcony, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. "You're up early," he said, voice gentle. She smiled. "Seattle has its own way of waking me." He set a cup beside her and sat down. "I still can't believe last night happened. The standing ovation, the room glowing with you in the center. I swear the light was coming from you." Desiree laughed softly. "That light wasn't mine. It belonged to everyone who fell and still found a way to rise. I just got to reflect on it for a while." Sterling watched her quietly. "You're too humble," he murmured. She took a slow sip of tea, the scent of jasmine filling the air. "No, I know that when I lived in that old house, I lived under someone else's light. Now, the light that stays, it's mine." Her voice was soft, but sounded like a prayer in the stillness. Later, they stepped outside as the sun broke entirely through the clouds. After the rain, Seattle had a peculiar beauty, fresh, raw, slightly melancholy, but honest. Cafes opened their doors, the scent of waffles drifting out. Church bells echoed faintly in the distance. They walked along the waterfront, where Desiree had once sat alone on her first day after leaving everything behind. She stopped by the railing, wind tossing her curls. "You know," she said, eyes on the water, "the day I arrived in San Francisco, I thought I'd never smile again. But pain's a lot like the sea. When you stop fighting it, it just becomes waves." Sterling was silent for a while, then asked, "If you could go back, would you choose the same path?" Desiree thought for a moment, then smiled. "Yes. I'd still love, still give, still fall, still hurt. Because without those things, I'd never know what joy truly is." He nodded. "And now, are you happy?" "Yes," she said. "For the first time. I don't need to prove anything." That afternoon, they had lunch by the lake at the same restaurant where Luna's last birthday had once occurred. The place had changed, brighter now, but the scent of pine still stirred old memories. The waiter recognized her. "Mrs. King, we hosted your family's party years ago. You look just the same." Desiree smiled gently. "Thank you, but I'm not the woman from that party anymore." Sterling reached for her hand. "Maybe next time, we'll hold a different gathering here," he said. "Not to remember, but to begin." She nodded. A peaceful beginning. Back at the hotel, a white envelope waited outside her door. On the front, "For Desiree." Inside, a single handwritten note, Brandon's handwriting, slanted, shaky. "Desi, I couldn't face you again, but I needed to say this. I once thought that your leaving was the end. Now I see it was your beginning. Thank you for not seeking revenge. Thank you for showing me what love without possession looks like. If someday you hear the wind over Lake Washington, it might just be my apology, late, but real. I wish you light. Brandon." Desiree folded the note and set it on the table. No tears, no tremor, just a quiet smile. She whispered, "I already have, Brandon, and that light, it's here to stay." That night, her plane lifted off towards San Francisco. Through the window, Seattle shrank into a scatter of golden dots on black glass. Desiree leaned her head against the window, peace washing through her. Sterling reached over, brushing her hand. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything," she said. "About loss, those who passed through my life, and myself. I feel grateful." "For what?" She turned, her smile soft. "For the times I broke. Without the cracks, where would the light come in?" Sterling squeezed her hand. "I think the light was always in you. You just had to take the long way to see it." She nodded, eyes glinting with moonlight beyond the clouds. When she returned home, everything was just as she'd left it. Stacks of manuscripts, reader letters, open notebooks. She hung her gown, removed her earrings, and sat by the window. The city below sparkled like a galaxy. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. She opened her laptop and began a new document, typing the first lines of her second book. Light doesn't come from the absence of darkness.
It comes from those who lost everything and still chose to rise, love, and believe. A week later, Luna called. "Mom, I finished your book. I cried so much. I want to work with you to help women like you did." Desiree smiled. "I'll be waiting. But only if you want to not to make up for the past." "I want to, Mom. I want to be like you." Desiree laughed softly. "Don't be like me, Luna. Be better." The next day, Harry sent her his first recorded song, "The House Without Laughter."
His young voice trembled with warmth. The lyrics read, "There was once someone who held light with bare hands. Now that light lives inside me." Desiree listened, tears falling as she smiled. "You understand now, Harry," she whispered. "That's all I ever needed." That evening, Sterling stopped by with a bouquet of white tulips, the flowers she once loved but hadn't planted since leaving Seattle. "You still like tulips?" he asked. "No," she said, her smile glowing.
"But I'm not afraid to see them anymore." They both laughed. Sterling poured 2 glasses of wine, the red liquid glowing under the lamp. "If there's one thing I've learned from you," he said, "happiness isn't about finding someone to love, it's about loving without losing yourself." Desiree met his gaze, her voice soft. "And maybe the most beautiful thing isn't starting over, it's knowing you're finally walking in the right direction this time." He lifted his glass. "Welcome home, Desiree." She clinked her glass gently. "Thank you, Sterling, for arriving right when the light stayed." Outside, the ocean wind swept through the balcony, carrying the scent of salt and jasmine. Desiree stepped to the window, breathing deeply. The stars above San Francisco seemed brighter that night. She whispered, as if to every woman who had ever lost her way, "Don't fear the dark. Sometimes it's the only thing that helps you see that you were the light all along." She closed the door, leaving the wind and the sleeping city outside. And so, Desiree King's story ended not in tears, but in a smile. She had walked through betrayal, loneliness, and silence, and stood again in her own light. If you've ever loved someone until you lost yourself, or had to leave to find who you are, remember this: there are no real endings, only quieter beginnings. Thank you for walking this journey with Desiree. If her story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below, because every story told is another light, helping us believe in love, even in the dark.